You see, Valentine's is torture and my birthday is a mess. New Year's is a lot of noise and our birthday's a pest. Halloween's a horror, but I guess I must confess that I really don't hate Christmas. You see, Flag Day is infernal, April Fool's is just a bore. Mardi Gras a waste unless you own a candy store. All these other holidays, I can admit that I am bored, but I really don't hate Christmas. Now it isn't that I like it at the most, I feel ambivalence. But should I really just destroy it? I'll admit that I'm still on the fence. It makes me tense. From the evil scientist community, I'm sure to get ejected, but for Christmas I can see the son of any true effective, because what is there to hate? I mean, it's really so subjective. No, I really don't hate Christmas. I hate puppy dogs and kittens, I hate flowers in the spring. Heck, I even hate the sunshine and the birdies when they sing. I can work up animosity for almost anything. Tell me why I don't hate Christmas. Though my childhood was atrocious, Christmas never was that bad, you see. So the most that I can muster is complete and total apathy. What's wrong with me? How can I prove that I'm an evil villain with the software with the holiday so jolly I can't even find a fault? If I didn't feel ambiguous, I'd love to make a solve, but I really don't hate Christmas. No, I really don't hate Christmas. I have an intense, burning indifference.
Festive greetings, our legion of elves and reindeer. Welcome to Podcast of Storm, where socially awkward snowmen, crazy stocking stuffers, and all-around naughty list members convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is our Jolly Holly bookworm, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, folks, and season's greetings and all that rot.
And I am your host / Santa Claus burglar, the brainstormer of pop culture. How is everyone doing tonight?
I'm doing good. We have our Christmas tree up finally, so it's starting to actually feel like Christmas around here.
Yeah, I should probably put mine up soon. Yeah, so it's been kind of a slow week in terms of stuff. So really, this is just going to be us talking for, well, for however long it takes. We got some things, but no, it's going to be pretty chill. No pun intended.
Wah, wah, wah.
So I don't believe we did this. Well, yeah, first year last year was kind of us just testing the things we do. But we did this October for the first week of October for Halloween with Dalton. So luckily, Dalton here is our own personal almanac of interesting facts about things you didn't know you needed to know about.
That's a pretty gleaming endorsement there.
Not almanac, encyclopedia. Why did I say almanac?
Either works.
But yeah, so the first topic is really he's taking the spotlight for this, as he usually does. But yeah, the history of Christmas, or I believe it is Yuletide.
Yeah, Yule or the winter solstice in general.
Right. Thank you.
Yule is slightly more skewed to the ancient Germanic tribes, whereas the winter solstice idea is more Celtic in nature. But I guess since you opened the floor, I should start actually engaging in the exposino jitsu that I'm so well known for.
Okay, well, yeah. To best of your knowledge, where did it originally, truly originally, in terms of the traditions that make up Christmas today?
In terms of the traditions that we have today and still utilized today, it's a 50-50 split between the Celts and the ancient Germans for the most part. And it's very similar actually to the origins of Halloween or Samhain, because all of the pre-Christian nature-based holidays sort of led off of and fed into each other. in sort of a cyclical way, you had the Harvest Festival, which was the origins for Halloween that emphasized a respect for darkness and death and the weakening of the veil. And then the Yuletide traditions, such as they were sort of the counterbalance to that. The now we've appeased the darker forces, so let's hyper emphasize hearth, home, light, warmth, etc., in the hopes that we can sort of carry the spark of life through the dark months of the year into spring, where it can then be refertilized come spring, and everything can jumpstart back to the way nature should function, essentially. The origin of things like the Christmas tree is one such example of this. Essentially, obviously, they noticed that all the trees would die off during the winter months, but they also noticed that certain trees, that being, the pine trees and adjacent families, didn't die off. So the logic was there must be something particular about pine trees that allows them to sort of maintain the spark of life all year round. So let's take these pine trees and either in sacred groves in the very oldest of these ceremonies or in our own homes, maintain them so that the spark can carry through to the time of life again. And the original Christmas ornaments were actually probably preserved apples that they would wire back onto the trees to sort of force the energy from the apples to be fed back into the tree in hopes of sort of resparking the initial vital spark of life, essentially. I don't quite know where you want me to go from there. Brainstormer. Did he leave again?
Sorry. I was I left for a sec. I'm getting more chocolate milk.
Okay.
But no, that is great answers. Okay, so how about so I guess kind of the Christianization of it would be the logical step forward.
Okay, well that sort of is that you can blame the Romans for, because when the Romans decided to convert to Christianity, their normal polytheistic stance on other people's religions didn't really work anymore, because it was sort of standard practice for the Romans to come in, conquer a place, and then basically say, for legal purposes, you're under the auspices of Rome now, but you can keep your gods as long as you can expand your pantheon to include our gods and the Roman emperor, because of course the Roman emperor had to be deified for the Roman political structure to work. But when the Romans converted to Christianity, obviously Christianity, at least on paper, is monotheistic, which means there can only ever be one god, which means all of these other deities have to either be demoted to some other status, like some pagan deities were rebranded as demons, some of them were rebranded as angels, some of them were rebranded as saints, and so on and so forth. But for the most part, you got to get rid of your old gods, which means you also got to get rid of your old festivals. And because people enjoy their holidays, generally when it got around to the you have to abandon all your gods and abandon your festivals thing, people were rather nonplussed. And because this is the ancient Celts, they did a sort of ancient precursor to Braveheart the entire time. So eventually, in order to ease the conversion to Christianity a little bit, they contracted a bunch of clergymen in the church to come up with a rationale for how these people can keep celebrating the same things they've always been celebrating, but with a new Christian spin on it. And because it actually doesn't say in the Bible when Jesus' day of birth was, it made sense for a festival focused on rebirth to sort of act as the church-sanctioned day to celebrate it. Funnily enough, if you actually look at the astronomical record, because of course there are astronomical events detailed in the Bible, in particular in the case of the Christian, in the case of the nativity story, there's the incident with the wandering star and that whole important shebang there. Well, anthropologists have studied those moments in the Bible, and they've determined that in actual likelihood, Jesus, if he was born at all, was likely born in the summer. Which makes this whole thing kind of hilarious when you try to argue with fundamentalist Christians about it. Like, why, if Jesus was born in the summer, do you have the day celebrating his birth smack bang in the middle of winter, except for ancient Roman conversion tactics, basically? Funnily enough, though, after Rome died, and of course the Roman Catholic Church took its place, because of course in the ashes of a civilization dying, religion tends to become more centralized. Even though the Roman Catholic Church did that, come the time of the Protestant Reformation, there was actually a strong push to criminalize practicing Christmas traditions, because the Protestants essentially believed that the Christmas traditions were too paganized. Essentially, it was sort of like, ew, you guys got that from those filthy, filthy heathens over there. We need to jettison those because those aren't technically in the Bible, and we only want to do what's technically in the Bible.
Yeah, but
And, away they went. So the hilarious thing is you hear a lot from religious conservatives in this day and age about the war on Christmas, supposedly. And in actuality, the people that are most to blame for any kind of war on Christmas are the exact kind of fundamentalist Christians like those people. In particular, there was a governor in England named Oliver Cromwell who spearheaded the sort of bans on Christmas celebrations. And from about I would say probably about 1680 through 1850, Christmas traditions and Christmas celebrations were actually kind of on the outs. They were repopularized, funnily enough, by one Mr. Charles Dickens, because essentially, if you've ever read A Christmas Carol, then the trappings of God and Jesus don't really show up in A Christmas Carol that much. What's focused on is the feasting element and the benevolent element and the ghost aspect and the spiritual aspect, which are very, very pagan in their stylings. So, ironically, if it were up to the fundamentalist Christians and the evangelicals, we probably wouldn't still have Christmas. But courtesy of secularists like Charles Dickens and the ancient pagan traditions that people chose to celebrate regardless, we still have it. And then in the 20th century, the corporations got in on the act and went, since people are going to be doing this anyway, why don't we cater to their needs and make money at it? And the rest is history.
Clearly. But yeah, I got nothing really to say on that. It's interesting to think, because now that I think about it, I don't know, this comes from a place of I think I've said it many times before, but I'm Christian, or
Mhm,
technically, I guess. It's
mhm.
anyway. It's weird how a lot of times, and I'm talking like those ultra fanatical Christians, obviously, they constantly. I mean, like I don't think really today, obviously, but I'm talking like maybe like during the Crusades or, well, okay, maybe not the Crusades, but
Well, yeah, kind of. Because the whole thing there was Muslims and Christians arguing over who got the rights to the Holy Land, and the Jews just sort of being like, but, just
um,
quietly shoveling off into a corner.
okay, yeah, the whole hating on every other religion that isn't Christianity or following the God, following God or whatever. It's funny and ironic because a lot of the traditions that Christians celebrate today come from various other religions.
Yeah.
I realize that's not really something new. It's just like I thought it was funny to point out.
Well, I mean, I think every religion does that to an extent. It's just a lot easier to incorporate new shit if you have a system that can accommodate multiple gods anyway. The main reason why you don't get these kind of turf wars from polytheistic religions or animist religions or whatever is because their system already accommodates multiple gods. So, if you already have 24, 36 deities, then what's another 50 here and there? Like, if you already acknowledge the existence of the Greco-Roman gods, for example, then what's to stop you from saying those Egyptian gods that the Egyptians worship over there, they exist too, and we can incorporate them too. Whereas if your whole family of religions is based on the idea that there is one God Most High and this, that, and the other, well then you're gonna have to have a long and forceful conversation with all those other people who believe in multiple gods, that aren't you? If you only allow for one and there's hundreds of them in every other culture, then either you're going to have to just quietly do your own thing over in the corner, or you're going to have to force people to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to learn about the history of certain like holidays and stuff because it's so colored and uh, storied.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I, as an occultist, really, really love holidays, because we don't really we don't really allow for magic in the public discourse very often anymore. But holidays, being as they're still holidays, are like the last vestiges of our whatever human need there is for something mysterious and complicated and primal about us. Like, we shove all of our desire for magic and mysticism and the higher dimensions and so forth into these specific days and these specific times, because we've kind of, I don't want to say moved past it as a civilization, but we've realized that you shouldn't legislate based on it, which, quite frankly, I'm in favor of. I don't think that anyone's religion, including my own, should be a reason for anyone to go, but morality. But it's still it's still fascinating that even though we've essentially become largely, as a civilization, a cult of science, there's still those dying embers of mysticism that you can't get rid of. I mean, the Christians tried getting rid of it, that didn't work. Other pagan traditions have tried getting rid of it, and they just mostly incorporated shit. Um, Oliver Cromwell and a counterpart of his, named Bradford, in the New World, tried to literally outlaw basically every significant holiday we have now, and people's reaction was, "Well, you say it's illegal, but I'm still going to do it," which generally tends to be the reaction whenever government overreach happens and they say, this is illegal now, most people just go, well, that's fine and all, but I'm still going to do it. It's the same thing that happened from in a more secular point of view with prohibition of alcohol in the early 1900s. Like, yeah, the government says it's illegal, but are people ever going to really stop drinking?
Yep. All right.
Because it's what gives people's lives joy and meaning and shit. So you start poking at that, and people actually start rioting.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think we have anything to say anymore about history of Christmas or Yule.
Or the winter solstice, or Saturnalia, or the funny thing is, and this is the part that always makes me the most interested, is cultures that have almost no connection to each other will often independently came up with similar traditions. Like the pre-Christian Romans had festivals of rebirth and celebration that were completely separate from the Celts, and yet they still shared traditions, kind of. Which in my brain makes sense, because in my opinion, as someone who genuinely does believe in metaphysics and genuinely does believe in magic and the occult, that points to the idea that there is something universal that they're all latching onto. But if you want to view it from a more psychological perspective, maybe it's just that humans are human everywhere, and thus will have similar, for lack of a better word, delusions about these things.
Mm-hmm. All right. Shall we move on?
We shall, yes.
God, my back.
You're just having a terrible night tonight, aren't you?
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Brainstormer spent like the last 10 minutes before we went live freezing his ass off, and proceeded to spend 10 minutes trying to fix that. And he also has a headache and a cold today, so he's not exactly having a great night.
I always have back problems, but it's like my whole body's aching tonight. Again, it probably is because I'm getting like a little sick.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
Or it might be because the weather's shitty.
Oh, most definitely that.
Yeah, I get those too. My body will just ache nonstop for like 3 days if we get like a major storm or a snowstorm or whatever.
Yeah. All right. So moving on, we have a Mary Sue article. It's not from Jessica. What was her name again? I forget her name.
The crazy one, or the one that's reasonable?
The crazy one.
Rachel Leachman.
Rachel Leachman. I don't know why I was thinking Jessica.
Yeah, she had. I think because the woman who wrote this article is named Jessica something, but I don't remember.
Jessica Mason. Okay, so this is. Keep in mind, folks, this is published last year, December 21st, 2019.
Yeah, but it doesn't really. It's nothing really time sensitive, so I figured it would be a good jumping off point to talk about this in more detail.
Yeah, this is from the Mary Sue. Happy Solstice. Let's talk about how Christmas is pagan. Welcome Yule. Again, this is by Jessica Mason, published December 21st, 2019. Okay.
I have mixed feelings on this, because, I mean, technically, yes,
Yeah.
but she's being a little bit smug about it, and as much as I enjoy pointing out the history of it, it's just because I enjoy the history of it, and I enjoy that despite the fact that I'm not Christian, I can still enjoy Christmas for the filthy mongrel holiday of mixed traditions that it is. But I'm not out for one particular side of this. It's why I hesitate to even use the term pagan most of the time, because for one thing, I don't consider myself a pagan. I consider myself an occultist first and foremost. But also because pagan in the modern context is kind of synonymous with neo-paganism and with European specific polytheism. which I'm not really on any one particular side. The most I will say is the traditions that we know of as Christmas are pre-Abrahamic religion, which includes, the Abrahamic religions being Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and maybe at a stretch Zoroastrianism. There's some debate about that. I personally would include Zoroastrianism in that family if it were up to me, but anthropologists are still kind of out on the choice there. But the thing I think it's important to recognize is every culture, whether you would consider it traditionally pagan or not, has some version or other of these same traditions. Every culture that had a part in the agricultural revolution learned to acknowledge those cycles and found venerating them to be important. Which is where you get into the kind of gray area of, is it a metaphysical universal or is it just a human psychological universal kind of thing? Or both. I'm personally in a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B territory. Because why wouldn't metaphysical forces have an impact on human evolution if they exist? In my opinion. Anyway, moving forward.
Yeah. Merry Solstice, the day where we recognize that the war on Christmas was won before it even started, because all the good stuff about Christmas comes from pagan traditions. It's a good thing we covered a lot of the history beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, again, in the loosest, most technical perspective, sure, but I wouldn't go. See, this is where I get off the train with people like the ones that write for the Mary Sue, because I don't consider the war on Christmas to be a good thing, no matter who's perpetuating it. I just find it extremely ironic that if you want to call the war on Christmas anything, you got to blame people like Oliver Cromwell and Governor Bradford first, because it was the Protestant Reformation that had the biggest bug up its ass about who was celebrating Christmas and who wasn't. But quite frankly, I'm more than happy to just go, the war on Christmas never existed, if we all just want to play it that way. Because by rights, in the modern context, it no longer exists. Except, ironically, among fundamentalist Christians, we're still having a bug up their ass about it. Back when I did go to a Christian church, the pastor that eventually fucked off and called me satanic had a major problem with anything Christmas related in the church, because he felt that Christmas was too secular and didn't center Jesus enough. Which is funny that attitude still exists, even though Dickens essentially won that argument about a century ago. And we're all better off that he did. Anyway, moving on.
Yes. Okay. Actually, we're here to talk about all the winter traditions that celebrate the shortest day. Is it really?
Yeah, that's why it's the solstice.
Okay.
In the same way, the summer solstice is the longest day of the year. As in, there are more daylight hours on the summer solstice than any other day, and in winter's case, there are fewer daylight hours than any other day of the year.
Okay. Huh. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Alright. First, let's talk about the date and the actual solstice and why there are festivals of light in all sorts of cultures and faiths time of year. I feel like there's a misspelling there, because it's...
Yeah, that's a really weird sentence.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it was just no editor again. And Jesus Christ, Mary Sue, if you want to be taken seriously as a journalistic outlet, can you please at least get an editor?
Yep. Alright, oh, right, I missed a part. Hold on, let me reread that. First, let's talk about the date and the actual solstice and why there are festivals of light in all sorts of cultures and faiths thing time. I'm just assuming it's this. Fate's this time of year. It's dark.
Mm.
The winter solstice is the longest night and shortest day of the year, and so a lot of cultures have winter festivals of light. Huh.
Well,
Again,
I mean, light is an aspect, yes, but I wouldn't. I'm curious as to why she's centering that particular aspect. Um, again, you can't really to really understand these holidays. You have to look at them all sort of as extensions and continuations of each other, because the winter solstice takes place in a context where usually before the acknowledgement of the solstice, there is a celebration of death and decay and the darker aspects of nature and human nature, which is where we get Halloween from. And then to counterbalance that darkness, you have celebrations of light, life, warmth, hearth, home, etc. Basically, one day to celebrate all the primal darkness of the year or of human nature, and one day to hyperemphasize the light and the warmth and the protection and preservation that nature has to offer. They're two sides of the same coin, the dark and the light, balancing each other out and keeping the cycles of nature stable and so forth. To the point that in some cultures, they believe that if they didn't celebrate some form of their solstice traditions, nature would just stop working correctly, which was part human paranoia and part possibly accurate. Anyway, moving forward.
right. Okay, so Tehillim is here. Yeah, good to see
How are
you.
you doing, Tillium?
Yeah, Tehillim. The podcast is Storm Before Xmas. Got a few of these.
Yeah, the entire month of December is earmarked for Yuletide shenanigans.
Yeah. I hope I haven't missed much. No, you missed the Dalton going on a seminar about the history of Christmas.
Yeah, I went all anthropological on your guys' asses, but you probably are grateful to have missed that one.
I don't know. I think it was interesting. Anyway, yeah, we're covering a Mary Sue article now. It's not bad
Yeah.
so far. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's poor framing. She's right technically, but she's being a lot more smug and self-congratulatory about it than I'm comfortable with.
Okay, so if I say this name wrong, I'm sorry. Ka Chan Chanukka is certainly one. The Chinese celebrate the Dongzhi festival at the solstice, and so is Diwali in India. The pagan Neolithic Britons built Stonehenge to mark the solstice and look for the light to return and be reborn. Is that why the Stonehenge was built?
Well, it's one of the Stonehenge was essentially a spiritual and astrological calendar, or a massive sundial. So it was built to mark more than just the solstice. It was meant to mark basically all of their holidays, because again, like I said, the holidays sort of worked in tandem because it was meant to flow with the cycles of nature and so forth.
All right,
But yes, that is one of the things that Stonehenge does mark is solstice. Anyway, going ahead now. Unless Brainstormer stepped away again. I feel like I should sing to fill the void, but also people probably won't want that. Brainstormer. Hmm. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. From now on, our troubles will be out of sight.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
And what
How's
the
that?
hell were you singing?
Have yourself a merry little Christmas, of course.
I don't think I've ever heard that song.
You've never heard Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
No.
Okay, there is officially a new contender about the weirdest thing I've ever known about you. How do you go through 21 Christmases or 20 Christmases
Or it
and
could be
counting?
I don't know. To be honest, the songs I hear around Christmas, like on the radio and stuff, and like at school when I was going there,
Mhm.
was Feliz Navidad, Jingle Bell, Jingle Bell Rock.
I find it kind of funny that you started with the Spanish one.
And you're just proven to be more racist, aren't you?
Well, you put up with me, so which one of us is the bigger idiot?
Fair enough. We wish you a Merry Christmas. But no, I never heard. What was it? Have yourself a Merry.
A Merry Little Christmas.
I mean, it sounds familiar. It could have been that I heard it like a long time ago, but I just don't remember it.
I'm gonna have to send you basically an entire album of Frank Sinatra singing Christmas songs now.
I know Mariah Carey's, All I Want for Christmas, which
You don't know Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, but you know the Mariah Carey song.
to be fair, I heard it. To be fair, I remember hearing it first as a cover from that show, Big Time Rush.
Yes, I remember Big Time Rush as well.
Yeah, so that's how I remember that song. I know it's from Mariah Carey. Like I looked that up and stuff. So,
Mhm.
but yeah. To be fair, I don't really listen to a lot of Christmas songs. So
I do, but that's because I'm weirdly obsessive when it comes to holidays.
where? Anyway, Tilium. Sorry, I didn't get these earlier. Yeah, Janoka. If I'm saying that name wrong, sorry. Also called Hanukkah, which is Jewish tradition, and Dalton blessed with the presence of a cat.
Yes, the cat wanted attention right now because apparently she hasn't registered that during podcast time is not the appropriate time to come wanting for attention.
Well,
Or
again,
if she does, she should know by now. All she needs to do if she wants to be petted is just to come up next to me and like just nuzzle me, and I will pay attention to her. She doesn't
yeah.
need to meow about it. But cat, so yeah.
Three reasons why your cat's like that. I can theorize. One, she's a cat.
Yeah.
Two, you named her after a goddess.
Yes, that was probably horrible mistake number one.
Yeah. And three, she's your cat. So having a big ego and thinking of like self-aggrandizing importance is pretty common.
What exactly are you implying there, sir?
Come on.
I'm joking. But good goddamn, that was. I feel like I have been roasted, like the eponymous chestnuts over an open fire.
All right. back to the article. The solstice is primal, and having a celebration at this, the literal darkest time of the year to celebrate light, is not only logical in its way, but a natural human response to the world.
Again, singling out light in particular is sort of weird, unless you're talking like light in the broader sense of like the duality between light and dark, in which case I suppose I could then get behind it. But yeah, singling out light in particular is a little weird.
Yep. Um, the date of Christmas, as we know it, was probably moved to coincide with the Roman festival of Saturnalia. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay. Within the big winter party was a celebration of a sun god, including an assimilated Persian god of light, Mithras, or just the Dun in general. Romans adopted Christianity and probably moved the date, as with many things, but it makes sense to celebrate the birth of God/light in the darkest time because of the solstice.
Ag- Again, the hyper focus on light is unnecessary, but yes, there was a Persian cult of Mithra or Mithras, who is said, which is a deity similar to like Pan or Hermes, that was said to be born on December the 25th. I find it um I find it more likely that it probably was to coincide with Yule tradition or winter solstice tradition, because the thing with pre-Christian or polytheistic festivals is they didn't usually last a single day or a single day and night. They usually lasted for basically what amounted to an entire month around the day, and it was just that day that it peaked on. In the same way that for most of prehistory, Samhain lasted for most of October and into November. It just so happened that the energies of that day peaked on the 31st. Um, so too, most of December and into January was earmarked for Yule or winter solstice tradition, but it was said to peak on the week between the 21st and the 25th. So that's probably more likely, but again, it's one of those things of like everyone acknowledging the same thing to be true kind of implies that there's either a human psychological universal or an overarching metaphysical universal. So I'm fine with, you know, all the more examples just sort of prove the point. The only reason why I'm not willing to give the Mithra festival that much credit is because the cult of Mithras didn't really take off very well or very much. It was sort of a flash in the pan thing, and that's kind of an ironic pun considering that Mithras is occasionally linked with entities like Pan. So unintentional pun, and shame on me for not realizing that it was a pun before I said it. And thereby could have emphasized it more and annoyed Brainstorm with it, but
I
damn, missed opportunities.
didn't notice they pointed out.
But yeah, I find it a little bit suspect that Mithras or the Mithra Festival was ever that much important. But then again, if everyone around a culture is saying this is the day on which we celebrate, life, light, heart, and home, then what does it? What do the specifics really matter if they're all sharing the same sort of universal traditions anyway?
True.
It's kind of like how it doesn't in the slightest perturb me that Hanukkah takes place in December either, because that's the Jewish equivalent of realizing we should celebrate life, light, heart, and home, and so on. And I'm sure if you went into the Middle Eastern polytheistic past before the advent of Judaism, there's probably some ancient origin of that as well, because there are actually still remnants of polytheism stuck in Jewish folklore and in particular Jewish mysticism. But that's a conversation for a different day.
Mhm. All right. So the date and even the nature of Christmas is not exclusively Christian. No shit, we just covered that.
Yes,
But
it predates Christ by a good 5,000 years at least.
all right. but the trimmings and trappings of the holiday are definitely pagan. We covered this literally within the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, and again, I don't really like the use of the term pagan. I think just pre-Abrahamic would be enough because, like I said, every culture had some variation or other of the cycle of have a harvest festival that acknowledges the darkness and death of nature and human nature, and then have a sort of reviving festival on the solstice that is meant to be a reflection of the other half of nature, the life, light, heart, home, plenty, and so on. And yes, there's some overlap because it's in the same framework, but yeah. Yeah, to say pagan sort of implies either specifically European, which isn't accurate because the Middle East had their version of it too. That's why Hanukkah is also in December. But it also, using the term pagan, has uncomfortable associations with modern day neo-paganism, which is way distorted and out of focus. So I tend to avoid the term pagan as much as I can when talking about this. I usually just say either pre-Christian if we're talking about something that's said to be specifically Christian, or pre-Abrahamic if I want to talk about stuff that predated even like Judaism and Zoroastrianism, of which there are plenty of stuff like this. And yes, I throw Zoroastrianism in alongside the other Abrahamic religions because that was sort of the transition period where monotheism became a thing. It's that religion that you can sort of see the beginnings of turning away from the idea of many gods into the idea of one. But that's another conversation for a different day. Moving forward.
All right. The tradition of the Christmas trees comes from, yes, solstice traditions, where pagans would bring evergreen branches to their homes as a symbol of life preserving through the Yuletide. The same symbolism applied to holly and mistletoe. The Yule log was an actual tree that German pagans cut down and burned through the night and longer to keep light alive. I thought it was to ward out any type of nasty little spirit of that kind of holiday.
Well, it's both. The idea is that if you're a being who's associated with darkness and death, then a reflection of light and life is going to spook you and ward you off because those energies cancel each other out. And honestly, bonfires are kind of a universal protective measure for these kind of festivals. That's why, if you remember back when I was doing my Halloween version of this back in October, I explained how the jack-o'-lantern sort of grew out of the idea of a sacred bonfire as well. So it's interesting to watch the same tradition sort of break off into two subvariants. The Samhain or All Hallows Eve one became the jack-o'-lantern eventually, and the Yuletide one became the Yule log.
Mm-hmm. Back to the article. Traditions have a way of evolving and changing, of course. The Christmas tree came into popularity in Germany in the 17th century and made its way over to England in the Victorian era. In fact, it was Victoria that popularized it. And now we don't burn Yule logs, but we still keep the light alive in this season with Christmas lights.
Well, some people still do have fires on Christmas Eve. That's why so many images of Christmas iconography have, the roaring fireplace and being very comfortable and shit, and sitting by the fire with a warm apple cider or hot chocolate or whatever. And speaking for my family's case, we only ever use our fireplace on Christmas Eve, oddly enough. which none of us really made a conscious decision to have a Yule log type scenario, but we ended up inadvertently doing it, which I find extremely hilarious.
Mm.
And no, I didn't mention any of this to them when we started doing it, so I didn't have any. I didn't put a bug in anyone's ear. It just sort of happened that way, ironically. It's funny how things like that work out, which again might lead to either there's some legit metaphysics behind this if you're so inclined to believe that, or there's legit psychological and particularly evolutionary psychology roots of this in like a human universal kind of sense. Anyway, shall we move on?
Mhm. Right. Yeah, presents and bounty at Christmas. That's a long, complicated path too. A magi brought gifts, yes, but again, it's about celebrating life and bounty in the darkest dead season. Also, the solstice has a long association with children.
Every spiritual tradition has some particular deference to children because in polytheistic and pre-Christian spiritualities, it was thought that children had the capacity for second sight when they were younger, and very often, in particular, in the case of the Druids, who were the priestly class of the Celts, they would examine children for signs of second sight, and the ones that had the strongest proclivity for second sight got drafted to join the Druidic tradition and become Druids. And of course, the women who had a special the girls who had a special proclivity for second sight, often because they were sometimes rejected by the Druidic priestly class, became the village wise woman, which eventually evolved into the idea of the witch. And then, of course, the Romans, when they converted to Christianity, took that concept and ran with it right to the end zone of fuck you and burning times and so on. But again, different story for a different day, and one I've covered extensively here before.
Yep. All right. Oh, it's cold. Cold. All right. If we go back to the Roman festival of Mithralia, it was part of a larger month-long solstice-adjacent party called Saturnalia. Yeah, one of the
Yes,
subfestivals.
we literally just covered this, and I actually got to it lasted a month long. It lasted for a month before you did somehow.
One of the
Get to the point quickly, please. Seriously.
one of the sub-festivals was Juvenalia, festival of children. So Christmas has always been there, which brings us to Santa.
Yes, okay, so the thing about Santa is it's kind of complicated because there are various Yule spirits that sort of are all that wise old grandfatherly type. Some people tie um the iconography of Santa to Odin. I'm not sure how I personally feel about that. I mean, Odin was said to occasionally go to essentially hide his divinity and mix among the mortals in the guise of the Grey Wanderer, which was one of his preferred disguises. And in this form, in the form of the Grey Wanderer, he would very often test people's hospitality, and obviously the people that did well with the laws of hospitality got rewarded, and the people that didn't usually ended up with their heads cut off because of war deity. But yeah, I'm not sure how firmly I would tie Odin and Santa together as an idea. I generally think that um, the idea of Santa is probably more closely tied to the winter equivalent of the Green Man in Celtic mythology. The Green Man was sort of the living embodiment of spring, and there was a winter equivalent that was sometimes referred to as the Holly King. And generally speaking, various other Yule spirits or Yule Fae. And they all sort of got grafted onto St. Nicholas because St. Nicholas was said to be the patron saint of sailors, archers, prisoners, and children. So a lot of his life got intermingled with the Yule spirit because the Yule spirit obviously also is tied heavily with, children and so forth, and mercy and charity and yada yada yada. But yeah, let's see how closely she veers here,
Yeah.
or if she goes completely off into left field, as Mary Sue writers are occasionally want to do.
All right. I thought you had something else. All right.
I might, depending on how she takes this.
All right. Saint Nicholas was a 4th century saint based on a possibly real Turkish or Greek bishop and a patron of beggars, prostitutes, and children.
And sailors. You missed sailors and prisoners. But, yeah.
All right. Santa passed down the years and took on characteristics of various pagan figures, like an old man Odin who rides a flying horse and leaves gifts for children in their boots. This is much like the Swedish folk legend of Tomten, a cute little gnome in red that leaves treats and shoes.
Again, it's various Yule spirits of various kinds. Again, my personal theory is the connection probably goes back as far as the Holly King, which is again the winter equivalent of the Green Man or Jack of the Green, and also oddly might be the origin for the modern Western folk legend of Jack Frost, because Jack used to sort of be a universal for a person, so a Jack of all trades and so on.
Okay. Shoes became stockings. Odin and Saint Nick and Tomten merged. Things grow and change. Santa also bears some resemblance to the Holly King, one of 2 aspects of Celtic pagan god that rules half of the year and then succumbs to the Oak King.
Yes, well done. You actually, I'm impressed she got that far. Points for you, Jessica. Right. You actually touched on the thing that I didn't think you would have the balls to touch on.
It's another story of death and rebirth, of light returning that resonates through the years. Sadly, we can't find a pagan origin for the little guy that poops in nativities in Spain, but he's great.
Oh yeah, in Spanish nativity scenes, there's somebody that craps in the middle of the corner of the manger.
Huh.
The Spanish are weird. And I'm not just saying that because Brainstormer is part Hispanic, although that's hilarious. That is funny.
I'm more American than anything else.
You're a mongrel, but you're my favorite mongrel.
All right. Anything that I really say, or
no? Just balls for just applause for actually touching on that, because most people completely forget the idea of the. Okay, so basically, in the same way that the fairy queens are said to rotate throughout the year in Celtic or quasi-Celtic mythology with Mab and Titania, so too the kings are said to rotate. And originally, the oldest possible version of that was the god of nature, who for half of the year was referred to as the Oak King, and for the other half was referred to as the Holly King. So that's the missing part of that. But yeah. So yeah, for those that are worried about the fairy queens not having a significant other, you don't need to worry because the kings get their shout out too and might actually have some say in what Santa Claus turned into. So yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's ironic that the Fox News crowd yells so much about the war on Christmas because most of what makes the season what it is has decidedly unchristian origins.
I can't believe I'm gonna say this, but I couldn't agree more. Now the question is, are you actually going to go into the history of that aspect of it? Are you going to talk about Oliver Cromwell and Governor Bradford? Or are you just gonna completely avoid? Because okay, because clearly she's more invested in the idea of lording paganism over Christians than I am. So I can't imagine she would miss. I can't imagine she would miss the opportunity to mock the Christians for essentially starting the war on Christmas themselves. But she also might not be historically literate enough to go back that far. So I'll be curious to see if she takes the obvious one-upsmanship or if she doesn't.
Oh, I thought okay.
Yeah.
From caroling that came from wassailing to decking the halls.
Okay. Yes. Interesting thing about wassailing. Um, First of all, the word wassail comes from the Old Norse Vasheil, which means be in good health. And wassail, for those that don't know about um, older or Victorian Christmas traditions, was a kind of punch that was said to be particularly good at keeping out the cold. And essentially, beggars or poor people would go to the homes of like lords and nobility during the holidays and essentially beg for charity in the form of food, drink, warmth, etc. And it became sort of the origins of um the Christmas holiday party or the community gatherings that obviously Christmas is now quite famous for. Uh, Wassailing is probably most immortalized in the old Christmas Carol. Here we come a wassailing, but yeah, there is some connection between wassailing and what would eventually just become caroling. But either way, usually Christmas caroling is done by the poor in the hopes that they will get some charity out of it. Although, funnily enough, wassailing was usually a little bit more forceful than modern day Christmas caroling, because if the um, if the lord or duke or whatever that ran the household wasn't receptive to the people seeking wassail, uh, the beggars would get kind of violent and destructive, which is very very interesting to me. Just imagining a bunch of Christmas carol like if imagine if in imagine if a bunch of Christmas carolers who sang the song "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" got to the line, "Now bring us some figgy pudding. Now bring us some piggy pudding." And bring it right here. We won't go until we get some. Imagine if they insisted on getting figgy pudding so badly that when they didn't get it, they broke shit. That's basically what happened with wassailing back in the day.
Hmm.
But fortunately for most nobility and most rich people back in the day, this was an established tradition, and only an asshole would refuse beggars who came wassailing around the holidays. Mostly probably for their own safety, but that's a different story for a different day.
Right. It's all older than they think, and far more about the longest night than what happened away in a manger. But it's still about life and giving and warmth. Mm,
Yeah, I mean, again, technically she's right, but she's being a little smug about it. And I don't need the smug. I just find it ironic. Like, for me, there's no. I'm not on anybody's team with this shit. It just so happens that the history suggests this, and this also allows me, a non-Christian, to enjoy Christmas still. So, yay. Um, and I the ironic thing is I've found most Christians don't know their own history very well. And so a lot of them I've had experience of they'll ask where does the Christmas tree, for example, come from? And then you tell them and they immediately just go, no, no, that can't be it. And like, well, according to this anthropological study and this anthropological study and this, you know, um, archaeological evidence here, it is. And there's like the thing that baffles me in both cases with both sides of this bloody argument, people assume that if a given tradition doesn't come from their side, they can't enjoy it for some reason. Whereas my logic is, if people of a particular side hated this so much and yet they couldn't destroy it, it must therefore be important. Like, Oliver Cromwell and Bradford tried to outlaw Christmas for about a century and a half, and so did the rest of the evangelical set back in the day, but they didn't succeed because they were being dumb. And the same thing goes with every holiday. They tried to destroy this thing, and it didn't work, which implies either it's central to the human psyche for some reason of, evolutionary psychology, or there's some genuine metaphysics behind this. And given that there are entities who are specifically invested um, in these holidays, in the occult and metaphysical side of things, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody tried to outlaw Christmas and then somebody who draws their power from those holidays freak the fuck out. And when entities freak the fuck out, bad shit tends to happen, like people get buried in blizzards and shit. or to call back to our October version of this, when people try to outlaw Halloween, that excess energy goes somewhere and then you get Devil's Night out of it. And it only calms down again when people start celebrating Halloween again. And I imagine that if somebody actually did succeed in outlawing Christmas, a similar thing would happen. The forces that underpin those days would go apeshit, and it would probably include Mab, because the winter solstice is basically her most powerful day of the year, and that would not go well, because one does not simply piss off Odin and Mab and every other winter-based deity in every pantheon ever and live to tell about it. It does not go well.
all right. To close out, I want to share one last blending of traditions, new and old. In the 70s, in the 70s, a show began in Hartford, Connecticut, called the Christmas Revels, which blended music and traditions of Christmas and the solstice to create a community experience that celebrates specific cultures and stories of the winter. The Revels now happen in cities across the country, and at each performance, no matter what, they read the poem "The Shortest Day" by Susan Cooper.
Yeah, I've never heard of this, so
Yeah.
I can't really comment on this.
All right. And so she has it here. And so the shortest day came, and the year died, And everywhere down the centuries of the snow-white world came people singing, dancing to drive the dark away. They lighted candles in the winter trees. They hung their homes with evergreen. They burned beseeching fires all night long to keep the year alive. And when the New Year's sunshine blazed awake, they shouted, reveling. Through, through all the frosty ages, you can hear them echoing behind us. Listen, all the long echoes sing the same delight. This shortest day, as promised, awakens in the sleeping land. They carol, feast, give thanks, and dearly love their friends and hope for peace. And now so do we, here, now, this year, and every year. And that's it.
I get mildly annoyed by poems that don't rhyme, but as a summation of what the Yuletide or the winter solstice or Christmas is, yeah, it works. It works really well. But again, I haven't ever heard of this revelry thing she's talking about. I mean, I've heard of revelry, obviously, but I've never heard of what specifically she's referring to, so I can't really comment on it. I'm gonna assume by the fact that I've never heard of it that it's not that big a deal. Otherwise, I probably would have heard of it by now. Because being a lore encyclopedia is kind of my whole thing. If no one's noticed.
Well, that was. I honestly don't want to say it was a waste of time, but there really wasn't anything to add or like talk about for that.
No, in case I fucked up my explanations earlier, I wanted to have something to kind of give more of a structure to it. So, plus it was the Mary Sue, and I wondered if it was just going to be a bunch of smug paganism, or if it was just going to, or if they were actually going to get it right.
I think it makes sense to at least try to end the year on something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say I'm impressed with the fact that she did better than I thought she would do, because if I remember correctly, this was the same woman who did the Frozen 2 with a pagan masterpiece
I think
article, and she didn't quite do nearly as well last time. So interesting.
Yeah.
I do find it a little weird that the Mary Sue has their very own like pagan and occult consultant.
Yeah, it's weird. Anyway,
which means that if the Mary Sue ever does pay attention to us, I'm probably gonna have to engage in some kind of weird wizard duel type thing.
mhm.
But it's a writer for the Mary Sue, so I don't think I would be that much out of my depth.
Right. Shall we move on to the next topic?
Old habits die hard, I guess.
Yeah, so with that awful and on the nose pun.
How many times am I ever gonna get a chance to use that again? I had to.
Fair enough. But yeah, so we're discussing. It's an age-old question and debate that people have had. I just think it'd be interesting for us to talk about for a little bit. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
That's a very good question. What side of the issue are you on it?
I'm on it. Generally, I'm on yes, it is a Christmas movie. I mean, like an argument can be made, obviously, for it not being a Christmas movie, but I think generally it is.
I'd say generally speaking, I'd say no.
Okay.
Which isn't to say that I don't like it, because I do. It's Die Hard. It's awesome.
Yeah.
All hail the awesome mustache twirling villainy of Hans Gruber. But I wouldn't necessarily call it a Christmas movie.
Okay, let's break this down then.
I think there are movies that aren't necessarily about Christmas that can be considered Christmas movies. Like, for example, the first two Home Alone movies fit the Christmas mold really well, but aren't really specifically about or don't necessarily need to take place on Christmas. But the difference between something like Home Alone and something like Die Hard is Christmas does actually take an important role in the plot and also the atmosphere of the story.
See,
I don't think changing Die Hard to the middle of summer, for example, would really change that much about the atmosphere of the story.
see,
Thing.
I disagree. Like, I completely disagree. While it's not like overt, like in Home Alone or Lethal Weapon, Christmas is a factor. Just because, I mean, like, it takes place in LA, right?
Mm-hmm.
So therefore no snow, but it takes place during a Christmas party. The theming or the story revolves around a man reconnecting with his wife / family through circumstances that kind of push him to do this, or at least come to the realization. Again, like, I get that it's not like super overt in the Christmas stuff, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it works. Again, like, thematically.
Mm. Which brings up the question of how far would you go before you stop considering a movie a Christmas movie? Like, for example, would you consider Batman Returns, the second Tim Burton one, to be a Christmas movie?
That is a good question, because again, like, I think Batman Returns, Christmas is somewhat integral to that. I mean, like, again, like, it is more of a backdrop, but I do think it's more integral than Die Hard with Christmas.
Yeah, sadly enough, I could see the argument more for something like Batman Returns than I could for Die Hard, really. Because I mean, yes, the party that gets everyone, captured and things, is a Christmas party, but it could just as easily be like the, whatever charity gala the upper crust people are throwing today. Because
True, but again, like, I do think it works as Christmas, because again, like,
because of the family connection.
yeah, I mean, like, name a Christmas movie that doesn't have a family connection to it. And I don't know, I get the counter argument would be there are other movies that have that family connection, and I get that, but the okay, Patrick H. Wilhelm,
Mm-hmm.
I believe his name is. He did a
Yeah.
video. He did a video a few years back talking about, like, I mean, it was about Lethal Weapon and Christmas and stuff, but I think the point still stands is that Christmas is a time about family, and the lonely people, like John McClane in the movie, feel lonelier because of that time.
This is true.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons why the depression rate skyrockets around the holidays, because everyone around you is saccharine joy and hearth and home, and even like everything from the music to the color scheme to the ancient traditions, such as they are telling you you're supposed to feel all warm and ooey gooey inside and so forth. And if you feel like, you're going to die alone and no one will ever want you, as is my occasional want to spiral into, and you don't have that connection to the holiday like most people seem to, again, by virtue of genuine metaphysics or by virtue of evolutionary psychology is the debate, but either way,
Right.
then you feel like something is wrong with you.
Right.
And sadly enough, if we ever get to a place as a civilization where we can acknowledge metaphysics as a practical side of things, it might be the case that there is a disconnection between you and whatever spiritual forces there are out there, if you feel that way around this time. Because my standing theory is that seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression is probably not a modern invention. It's probably always existed. And in fact, you might make the argument that the fact that everyone feels depressed around the longest night of the year and so forth might be the reason that a lot of these traditions were discovered in the first place, because they went looking for some kind of salvation from the angst and the depression, and they found, either that these traditions held some psychological value for them or some metaphysical value for them, either way, or both.
Mm. Right. Yeah, like
That being said, I don't think the family element is focused on enough in Die Hard to justify it being a Christmas movie.
okay, that is fair. I will give you that. I just think that how beat for beat, I think it is a stereotypical Christmas story with action and violence. That is what I think. If anything.
Christmas now with action and violence.
Well, with a more, it is a fair, like, I think if you were to look at it on paper,
Mm-hmm.
I think it would look like a Christmas story. Again, beat for beat. In terms of, like, the character journey of John McClane, who, again, is trying to reconnect with his wife, who I believe is estranged at this point,
Mm-hmm.
like at the beginning of the movie. And through his journey of his, like, through the journey that he goes through fighting, like, the bad guys, it makes him, like, see a lot of things. And I think also, like, the rapport he has with the officer character. I can't remember his name. It's been a while since I've seen Die Hard, so
I know the one you mean, but I can't think of his name either.
yeah.
Sadly enough, the only person I really remember from Die Hard is Hans Gruber, because he's such an awesome villain.
Yeah, Alan Rickman. I mean, come on.
It's like Hans Gruber showed up on the scene and was like, "I have come to make this movie awesome."
Yeah. Yeah, I think overall, like, I understand that there is an argument that can be made against it, and I'm not refuting that or, like, disparaging it. I just think personally, if because I'm looking at it, and I think the first time I did watch it was around December. What is that? It does have elements of, like, a classic Christmas story, in terms of, like, maybe like a romance Christmas movie or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Again,
So your argument is it's kind of the action movie equivalent of It's a Wonderful Life.
yes, possibly. Yes.
I can see that. But that being said, now that you put that idea in my head, I want at least one of the John Wick sequels to be set during Christmas so we can have John Wick Christmas. That needs to happen.
That would be cool.
And for presents, John needs to get just all the puppies, because goddamn it, we need to keep him in supply of dogs so he doesn't go on a murderous rampage.
What's funny is those whole movies take over like a week or so.
Yeah, they're supposed to take place like concordantly, right at one after the other. But honestly, I think that if somebody tried to sell Keanu on the idea of let's have a John Wick Christmas movie, I think he would jump at it, because Keanu is A, one of the nicest guys in Hollywood, and B, a massive geek. So if you told him, "Hey Keanu, let's do the John Wick equivalent of something like Silent Night, Deadly Night," or something like that, I think he'd go. Or hey Keanu, let's do your version of Die Hard with John Wick.
I'm still holding out hope that they ever allow the idea of him playing Spike Spiegel in a Cowboy Bebop movie. I mean, like, I know there's a Netflix live action movie, but he was really passionate, like, I think after The Matrix, of wanting to do that.
Yeah, again, Keanu being A, one of the coolest guys in Hollywood, and B, massive geek. So. Also, Keanu, if you ever for some reason listen to this, get in touch with Jim Butcher about you playing Hellhound Kincaid in a Dresden Files either movie or TV series. Seriously, I want that. I want John Wick as Kincaid. That needs to happen.
You know, damn it, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, you know, all right, I remember. He has a comic book. Like, he made a comic book come out.
Yes, I heard. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to.
Yeah, Berserker.
And if ever that gets made into a movie, it needs to happen before Keanu dies because he should play it.
Well, I mean, the character looks exactly like him, so.
Well, I mean, sure. The wonderful thing I love about Keanu is he basically gets paid to be his own personal hype man, and we're all just entirely okay with it.
Yeah.
Like Keanu Reeves is our generation's Chuck Norris.
Yeah, no, I agree, actually.
Like he gets to propose to Hollywood. Here is my latest wish fulfillment fantasy, and Hollywood is just like yes, and the audience is just like and yes.
He's so different from a lot of celebrities, especially nowadays, that I really enjoy him, just because he's so like down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I mean, like, it could be because, you know, a lot of things that happen in his life that kind of made him, I think, kind of gave him a reality check in a way. I mean, like, I don't think he was ever not going to be. Like,
yeah, because I mean, he had his big blockbuster break with The Matrix, and he gave like 40% of his pay to the crew that worked on the film because he felt that the visual effects artist did such a important job during the filming of The Matrix, and by the way, completely in agreement with him there.
Yeah.
The only thing I could ever possibly hold against him is that he was in the terrible Constantine movie. But I don't think that was his fault. I think he was just horribly, horribly miscast.
Yeah.
And he tried his darndest because he's Keanu Reeves and he just tries his darndest at everything. And also, and this might be a little bit mean, but I don't think Keanu really learned how to act until like around the time of the first John Wick, because before that he was basically monotoned in everything he was in, and basically playing Neo in everything he was in.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we're kind of in the conclusion that Die Hard is. It's kind of hard to really.
Yeah. We're not going to provide you the definitive answer in this one, folks. I think this argument's going to rage forever and ever and always.
I mean,
is Die Hard a Christmas movie is going to become one of those existential crises of the holiday season.
Yeah, it's been raging since the 80s, so.
Yeah, I think better men than we have tried, and we're not going to be the ones to solve the issue.
So yeah, I mean, I'm in the camp that it is and it isn't. Again, like I'm on the fence myself. I think I lean towards it is a Christmas movie. Again, from more of a theming standpoint than anything.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the same way. I could be persuaded either way, but I generally lean more toward the it isn't category.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, unless we have any final thoughts, shall we move to last topic?
Sure.
All right. Well, I mean, do you want to start or should I start? I mean,
No, you go ahead first.
Okay. So yeah, the last topic, because we always try to make sure we end on a high note, is me and Dawn are going to discuss maybe one or two funniest or like best Christmas memories from our past. I had one like prepared, which is okay. So this was, I don't know, like maybe 5 years ago. Yeah. So it was Christmas Day. My uncle and I, yeah, my uncle and I bought like this selfie stick. Don't judge us. We're not Valley people. We lost it soon after. But
Just quietly shaving you from my middle of nowhere country home here.
but
Sometimes it pays not to be a city slicker, folks.
tell me about it. Anyway, yeah, so we bought that so we could like take a picture of me, well, of him, my grandfather, and I, because it was just the three of us. It has been for a while now. But yeah, I wanted to take a picture of us, like to immortalize us, just like show happy times and stuff. And I told Dalton this story like before the stream, and it was kind of a mess, to be honest, for trying to take the photo because we never got to take one because for some reason the selfie stick wouldn't work on our phones. We tried my phone, we tried my uncle's phone, we tried my other uncle's phone. Yeah, because he has like a couple phones usually.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, nothing. And we even tried like flipping it backwards, so where like the camera on the other side is facing us to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention the fact that we're scrambling around trying to get into frame and look like
presentable
yeah,
for photographs and things.
Yeah.
Photogenic.
Yeah. But nothing. Like no matter what we did. And just we kind of gave up after like I don't know 5 maybe 6 minutes, no 7 minutes. And yeah, we just kind of gave up. Enjoyed our day. I mean, like we made Christmas dinner around like 11, and finished making that around 2, like you do with Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was pretty much that Christmas day.
I don't really have any funny holiday stories, but I guess I could tell some mildly embarrassing, humorous stories about how greedy my dad's side of the family is. Because basically, whenever we get together, my dad's side of the family and I, somebody always brings cards because our family legacy is essentially being a bunch of greedy, money-grubbing bastards and workaholics. So everyone, whenever there's a holiday or an excuse, everyone always brings cards and chips and money and things.
Don't.
And
are you Jewish? Are you like part Jewish?
No, to the best of my knowledge, no. My dad's side of the family goes back to Scotland. I actually had a friend of mine who was into genealogy trace us once, and as far as I know, my mom's side of the family is British, so there's no Jewishness there. No, at least as far as I know. At least as far as I know.
And you described stereotypical Jewish person, so.
Yes, I am aware. I'm sounding a lot like Mort from Family Guy or Howard Wolowitz from Big Bang Theory in the stereotypical Jewish mode. But no, there's no Jewry in my family. The closest my family comes to Jewry is the fact that I'm mildly interested in Kabbalah, as Jewish mysticism is kind of interesting to me. But aside from that, no Jewishness anywhere. We're just a bunch of money grubbing, greedy capitalists.
Still not seeing a distinction there, but okay.
You realize, of course, if there's ever anything that's gonna get us called Nazis, it's you apparently being weirdly
Okay. For full context, I'm Hispanic, and yeah, it's like, I mean, you should hear the jokes me and Dolan do off camera.
Oh yeah, one of the beautiful things about our friendship is we can both just mercilessly mock each other's like background and heritage and everything. It's awful.
Yeah. Dolan's a real racist, by the way.
Oh yes, a crippled, religious minority, gay, apparently racist, who also happens to have a black boyfriend, but that's neither here nor there.
All right, but please continue the story.
But yeah, there's never, to the best of my knowledge, been a holiday, particularly Christmas, where somebody didn't bring the cards and the chips. The sad and ironic thing is, because we're all a bunch of greedy money grabbing bastards, we all have stupid luck when it comes to gambling, and so it's essentially a question of whose luck can one up the other person's luck more than anything. When it comes to us playing cards, because we all have stupid luck when it comes to gambling. So it's just a question of whose luck prevails over everyone else's luck. That's the closest thing I've got to funny stories, is the times when my dad's side of the family have all tried to one up each other with gambling. And did you leave again, Brainstormer? I think you left again.
I'm back.
Huzzah.
Yeah, sorry. I had to stretch my legs real quick.
It's alright.
But yeah, like it's weird how funny family can be like during Christmas time, or well, yeah, during like December.
Yeah. I mean, if there's a quirk to family, um if there's a quirk to family, the holidays bring it out.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many of your Christmases or whatever your black sheep of an uncle has been involved with, but I'm sure there are plenty of embarrassing stories you could tell about him.
Uh, that's for off screen, I think.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean that's really the only memory I can really say that is like the funniest I can remember at this point is really the selfie stick conundrum that had happened. Um,
That sort of sounds like a Big Bang Theory title, the selfie stick conundrum.
yeah. But I mean like few no actually there's really no other memory I can think of that has really stuck with me over the years.
I have plenty of memories. They're just not funny. Most of them are in the category of Christmas just being awesome for me and my family, and my mom working her ass off to make it so most of the time.
Yeah. I won't say that honestly I've never even had a bad Christmas like shopping problem at all, like to my knowledge. No.
Well, you're probably not stupid enough to go shopping during Black Friday.
Well, that and also I guess I've just been lucky,
Hmm.
like to not deal with like the rushes or anything.
Well, now you have your bat, so if you ever need to go shopping during Christmas, you can always take that for defensive purposes.
Yeah, I'm not going to jail for trying to defend myself with a bunch of idiots.
Well, I mean, you never know. Especially now with Antifa. I'm honestly kind of amazed that Antifa and Black Lives Matter have never used the cover of um Black Friday riots to make it worse, because with them being so anti-capitalism, I can see them trying to co-opt a Black Friday riot just to prove how awful and destructive capitalism is, and then get away with destroying a bunch of shit.
Hey, it's Christmas. Sometimes it brings out the good in people, even the psychopaths or violent sociopaths.
Or just pig ignorant, self-indulgent pricks. But I question whether it's good or whether somebody just never thought of it. Which, given how reckless and not very strategic they are, it's possible they just never thought of it. But there you go, Antifa. That's my Christmas present to you. Have a freebie next Black Friday. Why don't you go nuts?
Yeah. All right. So yeah, kind of a short podcast, but honestly, I need to hit the bed. I am about close to passing out.
Yeah, he's knackered again because he can't maintain a proper sleep schedule.
Yep.
And I would give you some of my sleeping pills, but we've discussed it before, and you said they don't work for you. So
Yeah.
that's a darn shame.
Yeah. All right. So with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
I don't think "fuck off" is appropriate this time. It's a Christmas episode.
oh, please, we curse all the time.
Merry freaking Christmas, you filthy animals.
Peace.